What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Getting camped is probably one of the most annoying things that happens in League. It really makes you feel like there's nothing you can do, and it's probably one of the biggest causes for people tilting. To help me with this guide, I'll be bringing in my good friend and challenger jungle main, Pansar Dragon, to give you the perspective of a jungler when it comes to camping a lane. Anyways, let's get started. The first thing to understand is how getting camped affects your lane. It's important to recognize that you are getting camped since it really changes the dynamic of your laning phase. And if you want to come out on top, you need to play the laning phase differently. You are basically being put into a 1v2 or 2v3 scenario, so it means that playing aggressively and more importantly, positioning aggressively is going to be extremely risky for you unless you have vision of people on the map. In order to better understand how to survive and avoid a camp, let's go over why a jungler might camp you and the things you do that put you in a gankable position that make you a jungler's wet dream. For that, I'm going to pass it over to my man, Pansar Dragon.
Hey, so big thanks to Jeremy for letting me be on one of his videos. And if you guys don't know who I am, let me just introduce myself. I'm Panzer Dragon, also a YouTuber and a challenger jungler main. And I'm here to tell you some tendencies that junglers might look towards to when they are deciding to gank a lane. So a jungler will camp or gank a lane if the enemy is playing really aggressive. So some enemies who have to play aggressive would be champions like Riven and Fizz. The champions who have to all in or trade if they want to win a lane, or they will be denied CS if the enemy is like a poker like Vladimir. But when they're playing so aggressive, what this tells me as a jungler is that the enemy is going to be looking to play a bit more forward. They're most likely using their abilities, so their abilities will be on cooldown when you are ganking them. For instance, Riven uses her abilities in trades, so her mobility is limited if they're on cooldown, and when she goes in for that trade, she is definitely left vulnerable. So these enemies are easy targets for me as a jungler. Next up is I will gank a lane if the enemy has no wards. This one's pretty straightforward. Since they have no wards, they're vulnerable to a jungler gank. And the best way, of course, is to know if the enemy has no wards is if your allies feed you information or you do a sweeper check. Next up is if the enemy has no summoners. So if the enemy has one less escape, that obviously means it's an easier gank. And of course, less chance of the enemy surviving. Again, ask your allies if they know if their summoners are down. Especially Flash, that is the main summoner you want to look out for. Next up is if the enemy is overextending or the lane is about to push, that is definitely a sign for me to gank a lane. Because in basic terms, if the enemy is a long way from his tower, then there's going to be a lot more room for you to try and kill him. Because if the tower starts to pop up in your face when you're trying to fight him, then you probably gotta back out. Next up, I'll probably gank for my ally if I have a lot of kill potential with him. So some attributes I look out for when I'm trying to judge my kill potential onto the enemy is if my ally has a lot of damage, does he have a lot of CC, do I have enough CC or damage, and if the enemy is like squishy. Something I'll avoid is like, say I'm a Maokai and the enemy top lane is a Scion, and our top lane is like a Shen. Maybe pre-6, we can kill him, but after that, once you get some items, it's definitely very hard to kill a tanky Scion, especially if me and my top laner don't have any damage. And here's a fun one, if I'm duo queuing with someone, I'll definitely camp his lane a lot since due to communications via Skype or raid call, he'll be feeding me a lot of information about the enemy. And of course, well, I do trust my duo queue, otherwise I wouldn't be duo queuing with him, right? So a lot of emphasis on putting pressure onto my duo queue's lane. Next up, I'll definitely try and counter gank if it is possible. Unless you don't think you can win 2v2, then you just tell your laner to back off. But otherwise, usually a counter gank will happen if he sees the enemy jungler going for a gank and then he's in the area, so he can come in the area and turn that gank around. Most times this will happen if the jungler has vision of the enemy's jungler, and it usually turns out very well for the jungler who is counter ganking since the enemies probably used all their cooldowns on the person they were ganking. And so if the jungler is stronger and comes, then obviously he'll be free to do whatever he wants in that team fight. Anyways, for the next point, I will definitely gank a lane if the enemy has 0 escapes. So if the enemy does not have any escapes, then it's definitely hard for them to get away from your ganks. And usually if you land the CC or the engage, you'll probably net yourself a kill. So these lanes are high priority in my T-gank list. Alright, for my next point, I will definitely camp a lane if the enemy is tilting or he's raging in all chat. These people who are raging are definitely going to be on tilt and definitely won't have the best decision making at the moment. And so they're going to be more vulnerable and stressed out. And these guys are going to be your easy kill targets. And for my next point, I will definitely emphasize on ganking a lot of lanes if I'm an early game pressure jungler like Gragas, Lee Sin, Evelynn, and definitely have my eyes on the minimap to look out for these ganks. Someone like Shyvana or Warwick Pre-6 will probably not try to find ganks and concentrate more on farming. Alright, so we're done with jungler tendencies to ganking a lane, but how about we go over some tendencies where a jungler will avoid ganking a lane? So I'll definitely avoid a lane if the enemy is too tanky and we have no damage to kill him. Remember that point where I said we're both tanks and we're trying to kill San? That is basically going to be this point right here. Next point, I'll definitely avoid a gank if the enemy is 3-0 against our laner. So unless you got some kills on you as a jungler, you're probably not going to want to touch this lane, as if you do get counter ganked, you're going to be setting yourself behind, or there's a possibility of you and your laner getting 2v1'd. Plus it's probably better for you to concentrate on other lanes and make them win. Next up is if the enemy is pushed in, that's going to be a hard gank to pull off, and I'll shy away from these type of ganks. There are situations where I will go for a dive onto the enemy, or I will do a lane gank, but most of these situations, it's going to take a lot of patience and time. For my next point, if the enemy is 0-3, I'm pretty sure my ally can take care of this lane, and he doesn't need my help anymore. So I'm going to try and concentrate on other lanes and help them. And for our last point, a jungler will avoid ganking lane if he is a farm jungler. So this isn't totally true. We know junglers like Master Yi, Shyvana, Pre-6 Warwick, and I guess Pre-6 Akali, but most of the time they'll probably be farming their jungle and not concentrating on ganks too much. Anyways, that is it for jungler tendencies. I hope you guys liked getting in the mind of a jungler, and we're going to be going over back to Jeremy.
Thanks a lot for the help. That was a lot of information to take in, but to sum it up, a jungler will camp you if you consistently show that you are an easy target. So the best thing that you can do to stop a jungler from camping you in the first place is to make yourself not that easy to gank. The opponents are going to try to take advantage of you when they start getting kills on you, so keeping your cool and not tilting is going to be really important. The best investment you can make to keep yourself from getting ganked in the first place is, of course, to buy some wards. If you're able to avoid jungler ganks early on, your chances of being camped fall quite dramatically since he knows you'll be difficult to gank. If you do find yourself getting camped, make sure you're warding deep in the paths that the jungler has been ganking you in. If you're pushing up and playing aggressive, a lot of the common ward spots for a laner are actually kind of useless, since by the time the enemy jungler shows on the ward, you are already dead since you don't have enough time and enough room to escape. The map on your screen right now shows common warding spots in the green dots for each lane, and the spots that would be a better place to ward would be the pink dots. Also note that especially in lower rankings, junglers tend to gank a lane through the same way consistently, especially if they find success, so the path that the jungler previously took to gank you is the path you should watch out for the most with your wards. In order to win your lane, you need to use the aforementioned tips to make sure you aren't dying to the camp, as otherwise you're going to just be pretty far behind from dying to the ganks, and so finding advantages will be really tough. But if you do manage to survive the camp, there's quite a few things you can do to come out ahead. One of the best ways to combat a camp is through counter ganks. Communicate with your team to try to counter gank the opponents if you can spot them in your wards. Just make sure to communicate and that you can win the 2v2 or 3 versus 3 fight. In addition, you can roam and try to find advantages outside of your lane. Roaming is a great way to generate an advantage for your team, and players will often not expect to get ganked from someone who is getting camped, so finding a way to have a global presence can go quite a long way. In addition, getting camped can help your team get a lot of objectives, but be careful with this. Just because the enemy jungler is ganking you doesn't mean your team is in a position to take an objective. If they are, however, do your best to stall the enemy jungler and let your team pick up that sweet dragon or that tower. Any time spent waiting to gank you is time that the enemy jungler isn't farming or applying pressure to other lanes or objectives, and so hopefully your team is in a position to take advantage of that. Overall, you just have to make sure that you're warding effectively and you only take fights when you're 100% certain, as you are likely to get ganked in a fight if you have no vision, since you are, of course, being camped. So, big thanks to Pants for helping me with the video today, as it definitely would not have been possible without the knowledge that he brought. Do me a solid and check out his channel through the link in the description or the annotation on the screen, and thanks for watching. The agent to a game that he sure to lose. Major symptomatic flaws due to twisting, gutter flips and bats and forth, and it's time I know it takes some money, those of paper, keep in mind we just skip the ship well far along.